sent it and said that Jez would be interested in me directing it or acting in it or both. And I set to reading it. I knew Jez's writing and that it was wonderful writing. I set to reading this, and very quickly, at about page 30, I had this image of Dylan as Jennifer. And there it goes again. Is it maybe so then I read on, and then the image of her in her face in that role just had a particularly moving impact on me, and so we were going to do it. It went through a long journey though, because there was never a time that I was going to both direct and act, and it wasn't anything I ever. In fact, I very actively did not want to ever do that, just because that wasn't my nature creatively. I'm not very good thinking stereophonically typically, and I find it very stressful. So it took some. I went to Dylan, and she had absolutely no interest in doing it. And so then I went back to her some years later, and she had absolutely no interest in doing it. But there were a couple of times that we went out to see if there was a market for it, and there was some, and but there was no time I was going to be pushy on her, and pushy on her doesn't get you anywhere anyway. So then finally, and she can speak to this better than I, there was a change that came, and then. And just to summarize this, get to the tail of the tape so we don't have to go over this again, to explain. When she came on board, then that was when I was going to just direct it, and there was another actor involved. And we were almost at our first day of shooting, and 30 days out, which is on a schedule like this pretty, you got a lot of prep to do, not much time to do it. The actor who was going to play John had family issues and had to drop out. So I was sort of forced to, it was the only way was to jump in and do it, or let the movie just go. And I'm so glad that it happened, because it's, I should have seen this in advance, but what a great opportunity to be able to, direct the film, but also to be able to work with Dylan as an actor.
Dylan, I'm so happy that you developed an interest in it, because you are so phenomenal in the film. Let's have a round of applause, please. So many facets to it, so many things going on. What were some of the keys for you that helped you figure out Jennifer Vogel?
Well, I think it was very helpful to meet Jennifer. I read the book when I was 15 or 16, and then I read the script at almost 30, so like 15 years later. And I felt like I had a lot of my own life experience that I could reference to kind of color her character. But after meeting her, that was really what added to making her come to life. Just hearing her story through her own words, physically, just being around her, and I think even just taking some of her mannerisms, and it's so interesting when you meet Jennifer, because knowing her story, you would think she might be a bit hardened, or I don't know, might have some kind of wall up, and she's so the antithesis of that, and so light and so warm and unbelievably vulnerable in her truth of her life. And I think the biggest thing that she told me was, which was such a relief, was that she never expected any actor to mimic her. She really just, I think the biggest responsibility was for her story to be told, and that's kind of how I went into it.
We'll take some questions from the audience in just a moment, but Bill, I want to ask you about the kind of parallel tracks that the film has, and then developing it with Sean, and working on looking at the script, and having it be both a father and a daughter story, and kind of making sure that both of those angles to it get equal weight. What was kind of that challenge, to any hurdles to kind of overcome in that way?
Well, from the first conversations with Jez, I think we really saw it as the daughter's story. She really has the arc, the emotional arc, and that was kind of the focus. There's so much material in the book, and all of it's really rich and great. And Jez and I went to Minneapolis and met and spent time with Jennifer. But he's a fantastic playwright and a very experienced screenwriter. He had a real take on what the essence of the book was, and we felt an obligation to her truth when you're dealing with a real person and their life and adapting their true story. But at the same time, it was a partnership where we had a certain amount of dramatic license. We weren't making a documentary, and she was trusting with us, but we were very inclusive of her. And John was always like just a great, vivid role from his first moment on page. But it was really about how to kind of organize the events of the life, because it took place over so many years and moved around so much, and it was kind of a peripatetic existence that she grew up in, and how to structure it as a kind of non-linear time was where a lot of the work went.
If anybody has any questions, definitely put a hand up really far as we get the lights in our eyes. So, yes, ma'am.
Really brilliant technique and the brilliant acting. And I noticed, Sean, that this is your birthday week. Could I give you a birthday card to help celebrate?
I'm sorry?
How much time did you have to sit in the makeup chair to make you look so old?
The old part came naturally. It was the younger part. This was one of the things that Bill and I faced, was that the actor who was originally going to do it was pretty much right dead center of the youngest and the oldest age of John, and going over the years of the story. And we were running on a shoestring as it was, and as soon as it was really a choice of me doing it or the movie falling apart, I think our budget went up on that day, $1.5 million for digital de-aging for the earlier part of the story. But I didn't have to do any work for that. I just basically ran the set, started setting up shots while somebody took my clothes off and put my wardrobe on and did whatever they were doing here, and then we shot.
Can you hear me? Okay. So, movie making is all about, surprises, they come as they go when you're making a film. What surprised you most about Dylan as a director?
About Dylan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about this earlier tonight. I think that in every aspect of our life, we take comfort in conditioning and we suffer from conditioning. And original thought certainly suffers in conditioning. So, we have these voices in America talking about individual freedom. Most of us don't know what that is most of the time, because we've got bars around our own head, the things that are. So when Dylan comes on set, so much did when I suddenly realized how much of what I would expect from an actor, sort of normalized to expect from an actor, is contrivance. And there was, the absence of contrivance was there to such a complete degree. And the way you put that kind of in, discussion of film acting terms, we've all heard the discussion about how important it is to listen. It's more, what you have to say is less your problem as an actor than what the other person has to say. And Dylan, her listening phase never indicates what she's thinking, it just thinks it. And I found that with, in terms of that with her choices, and with the choices made by the script, or with the writing in a way. It's just such a moving, beautiful thing to photograph. But I think it's just the utter absence of contrivance.
Yeah, so I was just wondering why you were kind of resistant to star in it, because that's interesting. So.
Yeah, so the first time he approached me about the project, it was around the time I read the books, around 15, 16, and I just had absolutely no interest in acting. I actually really thought it was a ridiculous career path. Dressing up as characters. I knew that they were, my dad and my mom were great at their craft, but it just wasn't something I wanted to do. I always wanted to be in the industry, but I always thought, and I still think, behind the camera is where I feel most comfortable, whether it's writing, producing, directing. And I also felt like I didn't have enough to bring to her character. I hadn't really lived my life. I was so young and I don't want to say sheltered, but privileged in a way where I didn't feel like I had gone through much hardship. And then when it came back around, well, I'd expressed an interest in directing, and both of my parents on separate occasions told me that I shouldn't step foot on set as a director unless I know what it's like to act. So that's originally what got me into acting, and I did little bit parts here and there. I was terrible in all of them. And then when this came around again, yeah, he was gonna direct, and I actually met with the actor that was gonna play John. We spent, I think, 2-3 months getting to know each other and developing a relationship, and then 30 days prior, out of necessity, he had to take on the role. And I think I was just a little apprehensive about working with family, because in any professional environment, working with family can be disastrous or it can be great. Fortunately, it was great. But yeah, that's why.
Last one is right there in the corner. Thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Last one was right there.
That was just a wonderful movie, and I was just wondering, obviously, as an actor who, who's been in front of the camera all of his life and been around some incredible directors, as I was watching it, I was blown away by the cinematography and a lot of. Can you hear me? Oh, no. It reminded me a lot of Terrence Malick. Who would you say you got the best advice from in terms of, a director over the course of your career? And bring it.
So, yeah, advice or
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I'm as an actor, because I started before I fell in love with acting, which once I did, I fell hard. I was making movies in high school as a director and having to act in them because I was among a handful who did no homework and could shoot late nights. And so when we would do these movies, my friends and I was directing them and then jumping in and acting in them. And then when I got out of high school, it occurred to me that you need somebody to trust millions of dollars onto you if you want to direct film. It wasn't the age of having a little, you're doing it with your cell phone. There was none of that. It was film. It was expensive. So rather than be a director, I went into being an actor. I joined a repertory company. Once I started acting, and once I started having some level of choice about the projects that I did, I would often make a decision based on who was directing it because I wanted to be, as much because of the part and the story, as because I wanted to be able to observe that director working. But in the end, I think, you bring, there's a language that speaks to you at a certain age. For me, born in 1960, I'm right at that peak age of hungering, really eating movies up, when the movies were extremely nutritional. A really lucky hand of cards. And so even though I know I absorb things from directors, of course, across the board, I think that it goes more back to me as a film audience and the kind of the grammar of cinema that affected me versus that which didn't.
This beautiful film is so affecting in so many ways. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all of you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sean Penn,